Hello, Cleveland, and welcome to an emergency edition of the Dogland Podcast. In case you're living under a rock, the Cleveland Browns acquired wide receiver Amari Cooper from the Dallas Cowboys. The Browns gave up a fifth-round pick in the 2022 draft, as well as a pick swap of six-round picks with Dallas to acquire wide receiver Amari Cooper. I am your host, Jackson McCurry, and joining me is my co-host, Anthony Jokey. Anthony, how are you, man?
I'm doing good. It's been a long week for me, but nothing like a little bit of good Browns news to uh, pump up those energy levels a little bit. That trade I made today is a good one, and I know we'll get into it here.
Oh, without a doubt. And to those that said Andrew Berry wasn't being aggressive, how do you like AB now? And for those that say that he's not aggressive enough, I mean, look what he's done. Like every start of the offseason since he's taken over. Year one, he went out first day of legal tampering, got Jack Conklin and Austin Hooper and Case Keenum. Last year, got John Johnson on day one of legal tampering. And then this year, 2 days before legal tampering even starts, pulls off a trade to bring in, I would say, a top 10, top 15 wide receiver in this league to upgrade a wide receiver position that we knew he was going to be aggressive in trying to add some talent into that room. And, Anthony, like the rumors have been out there for the last week since the combine that the Browns would be, being aggressive in the wide receiver market. And here they are going after a guy that was probably going to be cut had he not been traded here in the next coming days. But there was a market out there. There were several teams interested. Josina Anderson of CBS Sports reported that it was down to what she understands was the Browns and the Jaguars. And lo and behold, I think Dallas did right by him by sending him to a contender instead of a fledgling franchise like the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Well, on the other side of it, would you rather play with Trevor Lawrence or Baker Mayfield right now? I mean, you can make the argument either way. But, as far as Andrew Berry and aggressiveness goes, I think I said it here before, and there's like one trait of his that I really like, and it's calculated aggressiveness. Everything he does is so calculated, and you could definitely see over the last few years since he's become the GM, he has been aggressive, like you mentioned, in different aspects. So, it's just patience, and you'll see that he'll make plenty of moves to try and improve this roster. He's done it the first 2 years he's been here. This is going into year 3, right?
Yes.
Going into year 3, he's going to do the same thing. Year 1, offensive line. Year 2, defense. Year 3, wide receiver, probably defensive line. So just be patient. I know that's a lot to ask right now, but just give him some time, and things will be all right. In terms of Amari Cooper, it's a really good trade, especially from the Browns' perspective, to get him, swap 6-round draft picks, and then only give up a 5th rounder this year. Is a pretty big win for the Browns, especially they're going to be getting in a comp pick as well from the guy getting hired by the Vikings. So they are in a good position, and they're definitely not going to be done with the wide receiver room. There's going to be more moves in the future, whether it's free agency, whether it's in the draft. They're obviously not done addressing the position, but to go out and make a trade like this really helps them, I think, in free agent negotiations, because if they didn't get anybody, the receivers that are out there could leverage the fact that the Browns are desperate for one in terms of maybe getting some more money. So I think making this trade helps them out in free agency. With the draft, I think that, obviously receiver, defensive line still needed. This kind of doesn't tip their hand now in terms of what they're going to do with pick number 13 if they keep it. If I expect them to make some kind of move regarding defensive line, I don't know if it's going to be a trade, but probably free agency. So maybe you could go into the draft and just take the best player available at that point if you feel like both positions are shored up enough. So I think Cooper's going to bring a lot to this offense. There are questions about, can he play in cold weather? The splits aren't that great, I guess. As long as he has a quarterback that can get him the ball, which right now is still a question. Coming back from the shoulder for Baker, but I just think it's a really solid move, and it still allows them to be aggressive in other areas to address a couple different things they need to.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they jumped on this because, you've seen last week, Mike Williams gets a long-term deal with the Chargers. Godwin gets tagged. Like, some of the wide receivers were coming off the board, and you were looking at potentially Allen Robinson being the top free agent out there, DJ Chark, Christian Kirk. So the names were starting to dry up for the Browns. So I think they were probably hopeful that Amari Cooper would get to free agency, but at the same time, they didn't want to lose the risk of not getting one and striking out on acquiring a potential number one receiver. I know a lot of people are indifferent on whether Cooper is a number one or a number two. I say he's like right in the middle. He's shown glimpses, whether it was in Oakland when they were still in Oakland with the Raiders or when he went to Dallas, that he could be a number one guy. But, obviously in Dallas, CeeDee Lamb was emerging, Michael Gallup was emerging, Cedric Wilson was emerging. There was so many talented receivers in that room that, Amari was made expendable by the Cowboys. Obviously, they signed him to a big contract a couple years ago. He's still on that big contract, and they were trying to restructure it, but I don't think they could come to an agreement. So obviously they were going to move him because his salary guarantees here in a week or two. So obviously they were going to cut him, but then the market started preceding itself like, hey, there's teams that want to acquire him to make sure he doesn't get to free agency. I mentioned the Jaguars. There was a couple other teams involved. And obviously, I think the fact that the Browns were willing to take on the remaining of his contract and not force the Cowboys to eat some of that shows that the Browns really wanted him and were willing to pay him $20 million a year. Now, of course, we'll get to the contract. I think they're going to rework this a little bit. But, the Browns were aggressive to get him. I would say that they're probably still in the market for another veteran by chance because the wide receiver room is young right now with Peoples-Jones and Anthony Schwartz and Demetric Felton. So I wouldn't rule them out adding another veteran in free agency. But when you mentioned pick 13, I wouldn't necessarily say wide receivers out of the question, but I would say it's leaning more towards they're going to probably take an edge at 13. But if the right wide receiver falls to them and the Browns really want him, it wouldn't shock me if they still pull the trigger on whether it's Drake London, Garrett Wilson, Treylon Burks, whoever wide receiver they prefer to accompany Amari Cooper and company in the wide receiver room. It wouldn't shock me if they still made that pick at 13.
Yeah, in terms of the cap situation, you have Cooper for 2 more seasons. You can let him walk, or if the guy that they would draft at 13 becomes, and a number one receiver, maybe you just explore a Cooper trade in a couple years, see what you can get in return with him being the last year of his deal. In a few years with the salary cap ballooning, $20 million for top 15, top 20 wide receiver, depending on how he plays here, could be very valuable to a team. So, it's just a wait and see mode. There's obviously plenty more moves with free agency starting very soon that are going to be made. Whether it's a receiver 13, whether it's defensive line, best player available, whether they trade the pick. They maintain the flexibility that they have by making this trade, and there's still plenty more moves down the road here within the next couple of weeks. So while the draft is still quite a bit a ways away, it's never too early to start looking towards that. But let free agency kind of dictate how the draft is going to go, and in a couple months we'll really see what this roster will look like.
Yeah, I think they're going to rework this deal. It sounds like from what people were saying on social media that they could restructure this deal. Joel Corey, who is a salary cap expert for CBS Sports, he said that the Browns can take 18.75 million of his 20 million base salary and turn it into a signing bonus, and it'll create $12.5 million of cap space. And then Cooper's new cap numbers for 23 and 24 would be $26.25 million. Now, that may seem like a little outrageous to Browns fans, but this is what some of these good teams do. You see, Green Bay and New Orleans recently were restructuring deals, pushing money into the future to create cap space and create more flexibility for them. Green Bay, for instance, to potentially re-sign Aaron Rodgers, which they're going to do, franchise Devontae Adams, try to create more flexibility so where they can keep their elite pieces together on the roster. And I feel like this is something that the Browns might do, because right now, when you look at their salary cap situation, they're $3 million over the salary cap right now. So I would expect they restructure Amari Cooper's contract to create some flexibility, but they're still going to make more moves, including Jarvis Landry, which we'll get to in a little bit. But the Browns are going to create cap space here to try to get some flexibility, because they still have a lot more work to do with this roster. We mentioned the defensive line and, trying to add some depth to some of these key positions that need it.
Yeah, there's still a lot to do, and you have to figure in the money from the draft picks as well, as too. So, at some point, you've seen with teams the cap will come to a head at some point. You can only push it down the road so far, but I'm curious to see when it's going to happen with the Rams with all the stuff that they've done. But there's a few guys that they could restructure to, create some more cap room. You still have to figure they're probably going to reach a long-term deal with Njoku. We'll have to figure that in. If they're going to extend Denzel this offseason, that's another one. So, they need to maintain that cap flexibility down the road here. So, I'm curious to see, I would assume that they'll do that for Amari and to see who else they'll do here heading into free agency.
For sure. Let's talk about Amari Cooper, the player, Anthony, because we've spent so much time focusing on, what it's going to do for the room, the flexibility going into free agency and the draft. But let's talk about Cooper, the player. Obviously, he's going to be 28 in June. He spent 8 seasons in the league, 3.5 with Dallas, 3.5 with Oakland, 4.5 with the Dallas Cowboys, but he's been a productive receiver everywhere he's been. 1,000 yards in 5 of his 7 years. He's been a 1,000-yard receiver. He's had 5 receiving touchdowns in each season. I've seen this stat. He's among the likes of Larry Fitzgerald, Marvin Harrison, some of the great wide receivers who have had at least 5 receiving touchdowns in 7 consecutive seasons. So, you could say, well, is he at number 1? Is he at number 2? He's consistent and he's productive. He's been to the Pro Bowl 4 times. Just a great receiver. I remember him at Alabama, how great of a receiver he was, and they've been churning out wide receivers like crazy. But he definitely adds something to the Browns receiver room. An explosive playmaker, great route runner. Like, he's just an excellent addition to something that the Browns wide receiver room was lacking last season. Obviously, the whole OBJ situation when he left, it forced the Browns to dumb down their offense to focus more on the running game and using the tight ends, Hooper and Njoku. So Cooper is definitely going to expand this offense back to what we hoped it was going to be with OBJ. But I think Cooper just brings something different.
Yeah, he's a very good player, and I just kind of was looking at some statistics before we start here, and with how good the Browns' running game is, here's the stat for you. So in his career, play action wise, he has 47 catches, 708 yards with a 71% catch percent of the targets that he's gotten in play action. So, that's bodes well, I think, for this offense and what the Browns and Stefanski do with obviously having like a run first offense. He's done really well in the red zone. He has 21 touchdowns in his career in the red zone, just under 50% catch percentage. So, I think he's going to do a lot for this team. His route running is pretty good. So, I'm very curious to see how. There's still a lot you have to put around him in terms of other receivers. We just talked at length about that. While this isn't the first, this definitely won't be the first move with the position, but I think that he'll be able to work well with Baker, who will probably be there, or if it's somebody else. But I don't know. I'm pretty excited. I think the Amari Cooper, the player. Dallas gave up 2 first-round picks a couple years ago.
I think just one.
Just one. When they acquired him, and he did a good job in Dallas. He did a good job in Oakland too. So, hopefully he can continue that consistency, which I think with him has been, one of the high points of his career. He's just been consistent over the time in the NFL so far. So hopefully he can bring that to a receiver room here in Cleveland that definitely has not had that over the last couple of seasons.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, last year was a down year for him, but he still had 865 receiving yards and 8 touchdowns. I mean, he was dealing with a hamstring injury. Obviously the emergence of CeeDee Lamb, like I said, Michael Gallup, Cedric Wilson, not to mention Dalton Schultz, and of course there are 2 good running backs in Zeke and Tony Pollard. It became a numbers game in Dallas. Obviously, a lot of talented receivers. Cedric Wilson's a free agent, but I think they're going to bring back Michael Gallup. It sounded like, and obviously CeeDee Lamb still got a couple years on his rookie deal. And unfortunately, it became a numbers game, and Dallas decided to move on from Amari Cooper, which is Cleveland's gain, because they needed, like I said, in addition to the wide receiver room, he's going to be a great one, regardless of who the quarterback's going to be. From all accounts, it's still going to be Baker, barring something unforeseen. But we're excited to have Amari Cooper join the Browns. He wore number 19 in Dallas, so I think it's safe to say he's probably going to wear number 19 in Cleveland. Some of the photoshops, he looks pretty damn good in orange and brown. So going to be a great addition. Excited to see what else they bring to the wide receiver room. But Anthony, as we turn to the other news that came on Saturday, we knew, because we've been talking about it for weeks, the future of Jarvis Landry is up in the air. Not long after the announcement of the Amari Cooper trade, ESPN reported that the Browns have granted Jarvis Landry permission to seek a trade. And according to Brad Stainbrook of the Orange and Brown Report, he does have a market. There are several teams interested in potentially trading for Jarvis Landry, who is due, I think, $16 million this coming season. And I mentioned it in our group chat with the other guys from the Dogland. I would be shocked if Jarvis Landry's traded. If Cooper got you a 5th round pick from like in Dallas's case, and he's due $20 million, I mean, honestly, I'm thinking a 6th round pick, probably a 7th round pick for Landry if he's traded. But I just think all signs are pointing to he'll probably be cut here within the next week, and he'll eventually go and move on to a new team in free agency. But your thoughts on Landry potentially being traded, because we've all kind of assumed he would probably get cut at some point.
Yes, it's not surprising. They can't have those 2 big cap hits from both Cooper and Landry unless they were to restructure Landry. But with giving him permission to seek a trade, that's probably unlikely to happen at this point. In terms of draft compensation, I could see like a conditional 6th round pick next year, maybe a 5th next year. Depending on if he meets certain criteria or not. That would probably be the ceiling for that. But we all know how much Jarvis has meant to this locker room. I would love for it to work out to where they can restructure him and he can stay. But it does not appear it's going to be that way. I think if you're going to have Obviously you still have some young guys in the locker room, in that receiver room, and if they're probably going to, draft a couple as well, I would love to have him, as the veteran guy, as the veteran in that room. But it looks like that might be Amari Cooper instead of Jarvis Landry. So, I'm bummed that this is probably the end of that, but I hopefully, they can find something. If not, within the next couple of weeks here, the Browns will probably just let him go. Unless, a couple teams getting into some kind of bidding war for him. But we'll see.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and there's still a chance that he's still with the Browns. I know Josina Anderson and Mary Kay and even Brad Steinberg have all reported that Jarvis would like to stay in Cleveland. He's not opposed to staying here. The holdup is like he's not going to take less money on a 1-year deal here. He wants to stay. He wants some kind of an extension, and maybe they can work that out. I don't know what the Browns what their price is for wanting him to stay, like how much. I think we've all said like somewhere like 6, 7, 8 million. Like if they did that over a 3-year deal, like giving him around that per year, I think he would be open to staying that. And if you guarantee maybe half of it, I just can't see the Browns willing to do that. I think Landry's turns 30 this year. Like if they can't swing a deal for say a Russell Gage or trying to think of another like Jamison Crowder. There's a couple other guys out there that could be like that middle tier.
Somebody had brought up like Tyler Lockett.
Yeah, that's another that I feel like that would have been a trade if we couldn't have got Amari Cooper. Because like Tyler Lockett's due a big money. I'm talking about like a middle tier free agent signing like a Russell Gage, Jamison Crowder. This won't be popular with Cleveland fans, but Juju Smith-Schuster, like those guys. If they can't sign one of them, maybe they say, "Hey, Jarvis, we'll give you a 3-year. We'll slap 2 years onto this deal, but come down to like 8 million, and then we'll give you 8 million per year, and guarantee like 15 million out of the 24 million over the 3-year contract or something like that." But if they can't do that, I just think they cut him and let him go, and he goes and signs with a contender. Hopefully not Baltimore or Pittsburgh, who could use another receiver potentially, but. Maybe he goes out and signs with a contender in the NFC or the AFC, and I think he moves on. Like it sucks because Jarvis has been so good for this team in and off or on the field and off the field, but I think we all kind of seen the writing on the wall, especially when this contract was signed. I don't think any of us thought he'd make it all the way to the end of this contract because he was. He got tagged in Miami, and that obviously forced the Browns' hand to sign him to a pretty big contract. But I think we all knew he'd never see the end of it.
Yeah, and you kind of with the position the Browns were in when they traded for him, you kind of had to overpay a little bit.
Yeah.
That's the state of what the franchise was in when he got here, and obviously it's much different now, thankfully. So, you had to overpay, for him. I think you're right. None of us expected that he would get to the end of it. I want to say we even talked about, restructuring on the road way back when. But, hopefully they can restructure. Hopefully he can stay. I think him in this offense would still be very viable, especially now that you have Amari Cooper, and with potentially whoever they draft or still sign in free agency. I don't know. I just think he's a good fit here, and I would hate to see him go, but it's kind of looking that way.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I know some Browns fans on social media today were posting the clip from Hard Knocks, and I think that was the moment like all Browns fans just accepted and embraced Jarvis. His speech to the wide receiver room about, toughening it out, even if you don't have, or if you even pull your hamstring, and just saying how contagious it is to just put the work in and not be lazy. Like it'll rub off on everybody. And I think it did, because a lot of guys, toughened out through injuries, I think, after that. And especially Jarvis, knowing what we know now last year, dealing with all the injuries he did. and just he was so focused to making sure he could play every week. And I think he only missed one game in his 4 years here with the Browns. And I think that's the one thing that doesn't get talked about as enough is his toughness, his leadership. He never put up like the elite wide receiver numbers that, maybe some thought he would, but his toughness, his leadership, and, the culture change that he brought to this organization will never be forgotten by obviously the fan base and the teammates that he shared the field with during the last 4 years.
Yeah, he's like you talked about. He's done a lot on and off the field, and I think the off the field stuff, especially in that locker room, is not going to go lost on this team, especially if the Browns do win a championship here, within the next 5 years or so. I think he should rightfully get some of that credit. I think for just the way you talked about that Hard Knocks clip, just the way his leadership was here. I hate talking about it in press tests because I don't want him to go, but he's been very good for this team, and if he's not here, it's unfortunate. The NFL is a business, and sometimes you got to make these very hard decisions. Like you saw in Seattle this past week with losing 2 cornerstones of their franchise. Unfortunately, these things always come around. So, we'll see.
For sure, we will. Any other thoughts before we wrap this up?
No, because I know there's other rumors that are swirling around, and we'll I'm sure discuss that over the coming days if anything were to happen with those.
For sure, we will.
Because those would be some major ones if it does happen.
Oh yeah.
We would spend a whole week talking on here about that.
Without a doubt.
So, hopefully nothing breaks in the next half hour. But of course, because we did a podcast, it probably will. So, we might be talking again later tonight. We'll see.
Possibly. And our friend of show actually just tweeted while we were recording, Stephen Thomas. Every big Browns trade happens when I'm traveling, getting on another flight in under an hour. So enjoy watching them trade for Aaron Donald and Kyler Murray or whatever it is that's coming while I'm in the air. So, yeah, we might be back Saturday night to do another pod. Who knows?
No, I'm tweeting him right now, and I'm saying, and me and Jack just finished the podcast, so you could really expect something to happen. So,
without a doubt. So, as we wrap things up, you guys can follow Anthony on Twitter at Anthony Jokey. You can follow me on Twitter at Jack McCurry08, and of course, check out the Dogland at the Dogland as well as thedogland.com. And until next time, Browns fans, as we get on out of here, go Browns.